Well, Manx Radio must have been desperate if they were waiting for that Phil Gawne fella to come on and do the Mannin Line. So what's tickling your fancy? Anything particular you want to talk to me about today on the Mannin Line? Lots of interesting stories about at the moment, not least how is the steam packet faring? There seem to be troubled waters ahead. Certainly the workers are apparently far from happy with what's going on. What else have we got here? Parents on the Isle of Man urging police and the Manx government to do more to stop their children from being embroiled in drugs gangs. That's certainly one that I would have thought would be of interest to people. So lots to talk about on the Mannin Line today, I hope. And it does appear as though we might have a caller. So let's see if I can manage to master the technology. I think it's Julian on line 1. So where am I? Oh, wait a minute. Don't seem to have pressed the right button. Maybe Julian is on. Oh, there he is. I've got him now. Marvellous stuff.
Hey, Phil. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. A shame about that little glitch there, but I'm sure by the end of the hour I'll have worked out which buttons to press by then. How can I help you, Julian? Anything particular that you're wanting to talk about today?
Yeah. Bear with me for 20 seconds because the context will become apparent.
Okay.
A recent article in the Guardian newspaper titled "International Investors Are Laughing at the HS2 Shambles."
That's not the Peel City Guardian, is it?
No.
Right.
And HS2, an expensive, environmentally damaging waste of money. And the BBC's got a headline, HS2, rail link rated unachievable by infrastructure watchdog, which has given HS2 a red rating, citing major issues with project definitions, unrealistic goals and benefits, spiralling costs, poor planning, and questionable quality. And who is one of the lead consultancies and contractors for HS2?
You tell me.
Wardell Armstrong.
Right.
The same consultancy company that's currently conducting the Windfarm assessments here on the Isle of Man.
Right.
So that's including environmental impact assessments, wind speed measurements, albeit with one wind sensor, and contending that Erie Stain will produce 4 times more electricity annually than any other onshore wind farm on the planet.
Well, I think, Julian, at this point, I should point out that it is in my backyard, this particular thing. So I just declare that interest. But I will endeavour to be as impartial as I can be.
I'm just making some points, really. Page 12 of yesterday's Manx Independent newspaper, there's a letter in the opinions page that concurs with my findings that the average annual production capacity factor of an onshore wind farm is no more than 20%, not the 71% or 130 gigawatt hours that's being printed out by the MUA.
So why do you think the MUA is publishing figures like that if it's so obvious that these figures are wrong, if which is, I presume, is your assertion?
Well, it's not an assertion. All you've got to do is multiply the 21 megawatts that they say that Erie Stain will be generating in any snapshot by the number of hours in a year, which is 8,760, or another way to do it is to multiply by 24 hours and then by 365, and then you get the theoretical maximum. And then if you multiply that out by 71%, you get 130 gigawatt hours. So that's what they're printing out. That is what they're saying, 71%. So, never been achieved. Even in the great Gansu Gobi Desert onshore wind farm in China, never got anywhere much above 20%. So I'm not quite sure how Erie Stain has this magic thing. Interestingly, just in the same vein, if anyone's kept a copy of yesterday's UKI newspaper, take a look at page 43. There's an article titled "Largest Wind Farm Starts Up." But SSE Renewables, a similar company to Ørsted, warns in the article, however, output from its existing offshore wind turbines and hydropower stations was nearly a fifth, or 20% lower than planned during the 6 months to the end of September due to adverse weather conditions, or read calm conditions. Their vast offshore wind farm only yielding a capacity factor of 32%, and that's offshore in the middle of the North Sea.
But surely the Manx Utilities Authority will have thought about all this, and presumably they will be making sure that whatever they order and whatever they build is capable of dealing with these conditions.
Well, I assume they're taking their instruction from Wardell Armstrong, but it seems all sorts of these calculations. 130 gigawatt hours is actually, the reality will be 33 if you follow the 18 to 20%, as all the other onshores are saying. It's 33 gigawatt hours, not 130. So we're going to be a quarter of the output. Last thing I was going to mention, by the way, there's talk about Ørsted doing an offshore wind farm here.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at another possible reason for Ørsted downgrading by Moody's and Barclays recently. And that may well be found, if anyone has a look online, on the International Transport Workers Federation website. The title to look for, Ørsted Day of Action, Unions Protest Around the World. With 20 million transport and dock workers around the world protested outside the offices of Ørsted and Vestas wind turbines because of unethical union-busting tactics used by Ørsted. Protest outside Ørsted's headquarters in London, Connecticut, New London, Baltimore, Texas, the Danish consulate in Los Angeles, Esbjerg in Denmark, and Ostend in Belgium. It doesn't seem that any of them like working for Ørsted.
Yeah. Well, I have had we have had a text into the programme, if I can get the right mouse to work. There we are. This is from John from Laxey. There are many articles, reports on the internet. Julian needs to exercise caution when reading them, as most articles can't be validated as accurate reports. Big John from Laxey. How would you respond to Big John's message? Well,
BBC, The Guardian. Are we not going to believe in the International Transport Workers Federation's own website? I don't know. If that's the case, who do you believe?
Well, and that's a very good question. Do you think, though, that the Isle of Man government has to do something in relation to becoming more sustainable and perhaps more self-reliant? So presumably a wind farm or a solar array or something like this needs to be in the mix for the future for Manx energy supplies.
Well, if you take the Arrett report that we commissioned, the idea of self-sufficiency by throwing at least £600 million at an interconnector from the UK doesn't really sound like self-sufficiency. It's a bit like saying that food self-sufficiency is the new boat coming from England. It doesn't really make a lot of sense when you sit back and think about it. Interestingly, by the way, the initial financial positive projections for HS2 were formulated by Deloitte, KPMG and Ernst & Young, and all of them were integral in the formation of the ESG initiatives. So if that's anything to go by, if you look on the news at what's happening with HS2 and everyone's saying that it should never have even been started in the first place,
I'm not sure everyone is saying that. I think there's quite a few people in the UK politics, particularly in the north of England, who actually think it would have been a good thing to have been completed. But perhaps there is agreement that maybe it hasn't been delivered in the way that everyone would have hoped. Anyway, sadly, Julian, I've got Howard wanting to talk to me about trees on line
thanks
2.
Very much, Phil, and good luck on today's show.
Yes, let's see, can I click the right button this time? So move on to Howard. Howard, you want to talk about trees?
Yes, hi Phil.
Hi.
It's an appeal, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and there are a lot of people, will be aware of these particular trees. They run in the Portashee Meadow alongside the road going out through to Braddon Bridge. And this is an appeal to the Kirby Park estate, the Drinkwater estate.
Yeah.
For several years now, there have been weed trees, as we would term them. They're self-seeded trees, and they're underneath these lime trees. And the lime trees were planted to commemorate the Silver Jubilee of King George V. That was in 1935.
Gosh.
And they are a particular interest to the island because if you go a little bit further along, you got the Jubilee Oak, and that was put in 1837, I think, for, should imagine it's Queen Victoria. But anyway, these particular trees, if the Kirby Park estate, the Drinkwater estate, could send somebody down to remove these trees, even if they're not overly large yet, but these particular ones, they're like a sycamore tree, and they're going to grow up through the center of those lime trees and destroy the shape of it, because they are a greedy tree, and they will grow anything up to about 6 foot a year.
So you're hoping that that the estate will be listening in and may follow your advice on how they need to look after the trees.
I've spoken to the Forestry Board, and there's not a great deal that they can do. But in the past, they have. What used to be a chap there, I won't mention his name, but he's retired now, and he did speak to the estate, and they cleared out the weed trees from underneath. But these things come up year after year, and they are extremely fast-growing and destructive. They're self-seeded probably from across the road, into the other side of the Kirby estate. The sycamore, and we all know them, we used to call them helicopters. They look seeds. And these things have grown, and if you're driving along, you can see them growing up through, and in the last 2 or 3 years or more, they're going deep into the bottom of these lime trees, and they're going to destroy the whole shape of it and destroy the trees eventually.
So your concern really is that the look of that beautiful avenue of trees will be spoiled.
For a reason, because how sad it is. I've just been down and photographed the plaque that's on the wall at the Quarter Bridge, and it says, "This line of trees was planted to commemorate the Silver Jubilee of King George V, 1935. So they do have a special meaning. They're not just a line of trees that's been put in.
And do we know who planted them at all?
I don't.
Right. Well, anyone listening in who does know, it would be interesting to hear. Yeah. Anyway, I better move on because Bonzo is waiting on line 2.
This is an appeal to the estate if they could do something about it before.
Great. Well, thanks for that. So let's see whether I think have I clicked the right button there for Bonzo? Yes, I think I have. Are you there, Bonzo? Oh, maybe he's not there. Something not.
Hello?
Yes, there we are. Right, we're just having a few button issues here. You were on line 2 and then you were on line 1.
John Peel used to have the same thing.
Yes, it's a terrible thing. Just before you start, and because you're responding to Julian, I've had two texts in. One asks me, am I for or against the windmills at Airy Staine? Well, actually today I'm representing Manx Radio, so I'm neither for nor against. I'm trying to be as impartial as I can, but obviously I do have a view on it. Then also somebody else has texted in to say, I do not want a wind farm at Airy Staine. The cost of installation plus the damage to the landscape is not worth it. Also, it is one of the most beautiful views on the island about to be ruined. Bonzo, respond both to Julian and perhaps that last text.
All right, well, I'll do the last one first. Okay, I wonder if people said that in the 1860s when they were putting up this dreadful industrial eyesore in Laxey, to pump out the mines.
Yes, it's a disgrace, isn't it, that wheel?
I know, it's absolutely hideous blot on the landscape. Like the people in Ramsey who must have gone, what on earth is this quarter-mile-long carbuncle being done, being put upon the face of an old friend such as the Bay of Ramsey? Why are all those hideous new terraced, great big sort of terraced hotel things being built on the promenade? Douglas. It's totally ruined the character of the whole place.
So that's the view element, but there was also part of the text that referred to the economic sense of doing this as well.
Well, the economic sense of doing it is because fossil fuel prices are unstable and they are simply going to increase. The OPEC group of all, and of course liquid natural gas producers are doing everything they can to maintain a high price, and indeed even higher. They're finding it as a very useful means of both sort of economic and political control. Also, of course, it helps fund their purchases of football clubs,
right.
which they spend an awful lot of money on. This provides a relatively low-cost solution to I believe the figure with contingency is something like £36 million for Erie Stane, and indeed the construction figure may be somewhat lower than that. That's actually reasonable project scoping and putting in reasonable contingencies rather than HS2, which of course suffered, as do these huge push-me-pull-you projects from everyone trying to put to change the specification of it, and in particular the costs. The main reason for HS2 costs climbing completely out of control was the amount of tunnelling that had to be done on the route from London to Birmingham, because it's going through the Chilterns, etc. So huge increase in costs, and that was because of rampant and deliberate NIMBYism by people and their Conservative MPs. All that line where it's tunnelled, those are Tory seats.
And you mentioned their NIMBYism, and I would never have classed myself as a NIMBY until this development was proposed in Erie Stane. I mean, I'd pushed for many, many years for onshore renewables to be developed on the island. I tore my hair out at the frustratingly slow pace of action. Now, of course, something is about to appear in my backyard, and it's quite a difficult conversation for me to have inside of my head as to...
it's not going to be in your backyard, is it? I mean, they're supposed to be 500 metres from any structure?
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm using the terminology for a NIMBY would be described as, but actually when it does get close to your property and your business, you start to view things in a slightly different way than the more general way that you would look at the world, in terms of whether, in principle, this is a right thing or a wrong thing to do. Do you not have any sympathy for people who might actually be quite supportive in principle of renewable energies, but perhaps are concerned, I don't know, about government's record in delivering big capital projects, the lack of clear evidence to support what's being proposed? Would you not have some concerns about that?
I contest about the lack of clear evidence for a start. Ronaldsway will have, of course, acres of figures when it comes to windage, etc. And there is the issue of the specifics of the site, but those can be modelled very easily on computers. So I don't really see the need for this, other than to reinforce the argument against those who would say categorically, no, don't want those there. They're going to make a load of noise. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to do, etc. No, they're not going to do that. But in order to have a case that then politically allows you to put this through planning, etc., you have to spend a year.
Julian,
even though you don't really need them.
Julian suggested that the MUA has massively overstated the amount of wind they're going to be able to harness from the site. How would you respond to that?
Oh, and the non supporting lobby for, should I say, the opposing lobby for wind offshore and offshore is very good at playing with figures. I mean, like Civitas, well-known right-wing think tank, who reported in The Guardian, seeing as Julian now accepts The Guardian as a...
Yes, I thought that was quite a development for Julian.
I know, that was... yes, he'll be going woke next. That they had hugely overestimated the cost to the UK of reaching net zero. The Civitas pamphlet, published on last Thursday, claimed to offer a realistic estimate of the cost, 4.5 trillion, and said government needs to be honest with the British people. However, factual errors were quickly pointed out. The most serious error was the confusion by the report's author between power capacity in megawatts with electricity generation in megawatt hours. As a result, he presented an unrealistic 1.3 million per megawatt hour figure for the cost of onshore wind power, the true number being more than 10,000 times an hour at about 50 to 70 pounds per megawatt hour. Another error was mixing up billions with trillions. So I think anyone who goes around,
I suppose it's easy done, mixing up your billions of pounds with your trillions, isn't it? Not a problem I have to say.
Yes, that's one of the things when you use an Excel spreadsheet for this, as Exxon found out.
Anyway,
I think that's an entirely specious argument. Yeah. The thing is that we should have had this stuff, as you know, ages ago. That Tynwald first spoke about onshore wind in 1994. Budget was allocated for an onshore wind development in the early 2000s. But that budget just evaporated away in the MEA loan scandal.
Well,
and from then on, it's been a question of pushing, and still, nothing gets done. As I think I said earlier this week on the programme, the banging one's head against a wall of porridge is very much the way things don't progress here.
I have several anxious-looking Manx Radio faces been looking at me in the last minute or two, suggesting that maybe it's time for us to take a break. So, thanks very much for your input there, Bonzo. And there'll be
nice to talk to you.
Loads more after the break.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Well, that first half hour seems to have flown by. A couple of more texts come in. I think there's a caller about to appear, so we'll have a listen to them shortly. But I have one text in. Good afternoon. My mother was head girl at Braddon School and was one of the people selected to plant one of the lime trees that Howard mentioned. And that's from Pete. And then we've got another message in on WhatsApp. There is one main fact all people must bear in mind when considering green energy. Climate change is happening. It's our children's future. This one must be safeguarded and preserved at any cost. Big John from Laxey. We also had in a... where was that one? Well, there's one here about... David Quirk. David's often keen to ring up. David Quirk from Moncton Commissioners should be made to repay the 20,000 plus to the Commissioners from the freedom of information that he knew about. And that's from Mike. I don't know whether David would like to respond to that one. There was a message about the steam packet, but I seem to have not been able to... maybe I've lost that. But anyway, let's go to James, who wants to talk about the recommendation in the AEA report. So let's see, can I manage to click the right buttons? James, are you there?
Hello, how are you?
Well, not too bad. Bearing up, as they say.
I'm sure you remember this report because you and I discussed it quite a lot at the time.
Yeah.
And in fact, before that. So the bit that I've missed, because I haven't really been paying enough attention, is why the main recommendations of that report have been ignored. Can you remember what the main recommendations were?
Well, I'm sure you can tell me, because no doubt you have them at your fingertips.
Well, the report is still on the government site, and it's referenced in the MUA's question and answer page on the wind farm development. They're still referencing this report. But I'd say the report's still available on the government's website, and the report is quite clear. The absolutely crystal clear recommendation was for biomass.
Yep.
And the report has, the outline details of, because I assume that the excuse is that it's not possible. The report was fairly comprehensive and covered quite a lot of detail on and the fact that it was possible, and gives sort of figures for the likely outputs potential. And of course, in terms of the current debate, it would seem like a no-brainer because it's not intrusive, it's very low risk, it's relatively low cost. So I basically wondered if you knew, because obviously you've had more of an eye on this than I have probably, why they ignored it completely.
Well, I'm not wholly sure why it was ignored. Of course, I left politics in a rather dramatic fashion. So what's gone on subsequently is for others to discuss. It could well be that someone is planning a biomass renewable energy development, and we may well hear from them in the next week or two. Who knows?
The MUA.
Well, I don't know. In terms, though, of onshore renewables, onshore wind is tried and tested. It seems to be one of the cheaper forms. So certainly, in terms of wind turbines, it's cheaper than offshore. Are you not in favour of onshore wind?
Well, everything has its place. To say my sort of curiosity really was, and again, the AEA report clarified that onshore wind was likely to be extremely difficult in the Isle of Man for all the reasons that we're currently seeing. All of this was known. It's not a surprise. Government paid for this report and then have completely ignored the recommendations. And obviously, one of the best things about the report is that it analysed all of the options based on multiple criteria, including how difficult they would be in terms of selling it to the public, the risk factors. It was a brilliant report. I went to the presentation and so did you, and then obviously then sat and watched as it was shelved. And so of course now it's sort of back to the forefront. And as I say, what caught my eye was that it's still being referenced. This report is still being referenced on the MUA website in relation to this government development. And I thought, well, if they've read it and they know what the recommendations were, why has nobody mentioned the fact that wasn't the first recommendation? That there were other recommendations within the report which don't have any of these challenges.
Yeah.
It is completely secure, is of massive benefit to the Isle of Man in terms of keeping money on the island. Doesn't have any of the visual impact problems. Where it might be that this has been dismissed somewhere and I've just not seen it. So I thought, well, has anybody seen it? Has there been any justification for why the government paid for this report?
Well, certainly in all the documentation I've read recently in relation to energy production sustainability, there doesn't seem to be any reference to biomass in there. So no doubt someone from government may well be listening. And if you wanted to ring up and explain to us why there's been no progress on biomass, we'd be delighted to hear from you. So, James, thanks very much for your input. And
take care.
Right, okay. So lots of texts coming into the programme. Let's just see what we've got here. Yes, one here, I think the single-use plastics ban is going to backfire. Carrier bags are being banned, but only the thin ones seem to be available. Thicker ones use more plastic. Really not... Oh, I see. The thin ones are being banned, but not the thicker ones. They use more plastic. Really not well thought through, says Scott. And then a nice one here. Lucy can text in again. She says, lovely to hear you, Phil, on the Mannin Line. A true Manxman. Well, others might argue about that. And then my grandfather, John Macaulay, planted one of the trees on Braddon Strait on behalf of the Manx Legion. They are beautiful and must be protected. Once again, part of our proud heritage. And that's from Ruth in Douglas City, she says. I thought there was only Peel City in the island, but no, Douglas City. And that's good. What else have we got here? Good afternoon, please. Can we get away from the wind farm? Google information. I suggest these people stand for MHK. We have other major problems on the island: hospital, dentists, care workers. Regards from Kay. And Kay makes a very good point. Sometimes in political discourse, we can get rather fixated on the same things, and actually there are other significant problems that we need to consider. Then another one in here: in response to Bonzo, the Wardle Armstrong report itself states using the wind speed data is inherently risky, and relying on this for decision making is not ideal. As well as the average wind speed figure not being accurate, there are localised wind effects associated with the terrain, and it cannot be guaranteed that the annual energy figure will match the extrapolate of data. It goes on to state caution should be used if placing any weight on the predicted generation figure, and subsequent economic analysis as part of the decision-making process. It also says there are large numbers of unknowns that can dramatically skew the outcome. This isn't from NIMBYs. This is directly quoted in the professional advice to the MUA by their own contractors, and that is from texter with the number ending 417, but they don't give me a name, so I don't know who that would be. Could it be Alf Cannon doesn't want the wind turbines in Michael? Somebody texts in. What else have we got here? A lot of things can be modelled on computer, but they don't necessarily represent reality. I support some green issues, but I don't want any wind farms, says Victoria. Then where have we got now? Another. Oh yes, it's this one is Big. Is it Big Phil? I think, and that's not me. The Manx public are being sold a pup with regard to net zero. Julian is right. It's a load of cobblers, as are these useless windmills. An agenda driven by eco-zealots like Just Stop Oil, and that's from Big Phil. Other views, of course, are available. Now let's see what else have we got here. Hi, there is a plan for a biomass plant in the north of the island, but the owners want 40 million of taxpayers' money to build it. Right. Well, that's interesting. I am told that there will be an announcement about that in the not too distant future, so it'll be interesting to see whether that is the case or not. And then we move on to ash trees. So given your knowledge of trees, and that I believe you were aware of ash dieback disease from your time in Tynwald, and the debate and questions Geoffrey Boot had in Tynwald, I think, to be fair, ash dieback, if it was a thing when I was still in Tynwald, it wouldn't have been fully understood at that stage. But anyway, and the debate and questions Geoffrey Boot had in Tynwald about us having to cut down before they fall down, potentially over 100,000 ash trees, if not 200,000. Please can you stress to the listeners what's being done all over the island is not because tree surgeons want the work or log suppliers are running short, or even the landowner wants a better view, but that the ash trees everywhere are incredibly dangerous, and not if but when they will fall, as sadly people across have been killed by them falling. But why is rumours and counter rumour going around the island, but so little said by DEFRA? Could you please stress to Claire Barber when you see her next? And that's a good point, actually. I don't think I've seen Claire Barber for a while, so maybe I need to make an appointment. We need more information being published to explain what's being done about this awful disease, which will cull 1 in 4 of our trees, and nothing is being said about it or sadly done other than cutting them down as it's so dangerous. And that's from Dick, and a good point. I mean, it's a serious issue, certainly one of great concern, I know, to the government, because there is no real answer to this other than felling the trees. Julian Barton writes in and says the wind industry's own website states the average capacity factor across all on the offshore and wind farms is 32%. This translates into a rough average of 18% capacity factor for the 9,000 onshore wind farms in the UK. That would indicate that Airey Stain would yield 33 gigawatt hours, not the 130 that the MUA is suggesting. And oh yes, and if anyone is listening to any of this and thinking, I could give them chapter and verse on that, I should ring up the Mannin Line. Well, crack on and do it. 66 13 68 is the number, and far better than listening to me wittering on, I would have thought. And then I think this is the final message in. Phil is the real reason why the MUA are putting the wind turbines down south, because Alf Cannon lives up north. Well, I would suggest it's down the north and up the south, but that's just my personal view. And he doesn't want them in his constituency. What a suggestion that an MHK would do such a thing. And to be fair, the Chief Minister has always exclaimed on this matter that it is not for him to decide. This is a matter for the MUA to decide where the site is. So that's in answer to that text. I don't think there's a name on that one other than Hi Phil. So, and then another text that's come in. Are you launching a bid to take over Manx Wireless as you're never off the airwaves? And that's from Francis. Well, you've seen through my cunning plan. Gosh, well, there we are. So that's me out of texts now, out of texts and out of calls. So remember the number, 66 13 68. Always happy to hear from people. Anyone else planted a tree in that row of lime trees along the road from Quarterbridge to Braddon? Be great to hear if there were any others who were involved with that, or who have family or remember their family telling them about it. What else can we talk about? Well, has the SNP's bubble finally been burst? The by-election result in the UK would seem to indicate that maybe Labour is about to start winning back in Scotland again, which would see getting on for 2 decades, I think, of SNP power possibly coming to an end, or will the SNP bounce back? Anyway, more texts coming in. And Wilf is on, so I'll quickly read one of these texts and then we'll get over to Wilf. Afternoon, Phil. I've been told that the moisture in our wood is not suitable for biomass, and when it burns it gives off fumes not in line with the atmosphere. Thanks, from Sean. Well, that is the case with wood chip. We can't get the dried product to the extent that they would have in much larger areas of production. But it's not that you can't produce biomass. There are lots of other materials you could use in biomass, either in terms of direct fuels actually being burned, or potentially producing biogas. So let's go to Wilf. I'm sure Wilf will have some very exciting and interesting things to tell me about in relation to generating electricity. Wilf, fast am I.
Well, it's not exciting. I've been on about this before, but I've never heard anybody else mention it. And I forget windmills on the sea, on the land. Forget all that. We've got the rise and the fall of the sea.
Yeah.
We've got a 20-foot, round about 20-foot average. And it happens twice a day, every day. And it's reliable. And it only stops at high tide and low tide for 20 minutes. If you put generators on rafts or whatever, on the harbour wall even, on floats going up and down the harbour wall, on the Queen's Pier, anywhere at all, it'll generate electric all the time, except for 20 minutes. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Nobody's ever mentioned this before, and I know they do it in places in Canada where they've got a bigger rise and fall of the tide there. But we have a big one here, and it needs to be used.
I felt a bit of a twitch coming on when you talked about a 20-foot roundabout. But I mean, there is that fall on the sea, isn't there? And I know that these things were looked at. Certainly, when I was minister, there was talk of two developments. Actually, there was one which was tidal power. So that was the tide, the race of the tide, the one at the Point of Ayre, and one at Langness.
They talk about the currents back and forward. Fair enough, but the rise and the fall is the one that happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since the world began, we've had rise and fall of the tide.
And there are
it's there to be used. Yeah,
certainly there are lots of developments, lots of trials being done on these sorts of things. One of the ways that it works best, though, seems to be in terms of likes of sea locks, which are fed by the sea, and then if you can put a dam at the end of the sea lock, you can then generate the power as the water flows out. I can only go back on my time in politics. We had looked at these sorts of things, and at the time, the only projects that were working were ones that had substantial investment in basically as a trial sort of test bed thing. Now, I'm sure things have developed a lot since then. I mean, that's what's it now, 7 years since I was in Tynwald. So I'm sure there have been developments, but I know it was fairly early days in terms of that sort of thing. Have they got any flood defences sorted in Ramsey yet, or are you?
No. The government is always doing stupid things. They can't help themselves.
Yeah.
We need a flood defence, but we've needed it. Well, since Ramsey began. But all we need there is a 2-foot high wall. That's it. Finished job. But no, they want to do all stupid fancy things. They were talking about glass walls at one time. Can you imagine how stupid that is? And glass walls and big areas to sit out on deck chairs and things. Where do they think they live? Do they think they're in the Bahamas or somewhere? You know what I mean? How many months of sunshine do we get?
Well, you're going to have a nice sunny weekend and relatively warm temperatures for the Isle of Man. So maybe deck chairs along the quay in Ramsey could be a thing.
No, just forget it. It's just absolute stupidity. If we would have done what I said years ago, we wouldn't have no problems whatsoever. It would have been done, finished.
Yeah.
Now,
and that's just the 2-foot wall, you reckon?
That's all, a 2-foot wall, 2 foot thick, 2 foot square, if you like.
Yeah.
And you can stand on it, sit on it, step over it, but it stops the sea coming in. Right round the harbour, no problem whatsoever. You take away the chains and you replace it with a 2-foot wall. Job done, finished.
Well, I'm sure all the MHKs will be listening in, and they'll be falling over backwards to design and develop this for Ramsey.
They might listen in, but it goes in one ear and out the other. Empty heads.
Well, you could say that. I couldn't possibly comment. Anyway, thanks for that, Wilf. There's a few more texts coming in, so we'll move on to those. Thanks for your call. Texts. What other texts have we had here? Yes, John has texted in to say, just a question, re the AEA report. There's no detail for Airy Staine. 8 sites listed for Windfarm. Please review, not detailing the selected sites. So I think what they're suggesting there is that the selected site wasn't listed. I think that's what they're saying. And then ShopRite prices compared to Tesco is outrageous. So I'm not sure which bit is outrageous, that we don't have a name for this text, whether it's Tesco that's outrageous or ShopRite that's outrageous. Then we move on. It's not just ash trees. What is the disease in so many horse chestnut trees this year? Yes, there is a disease that's been affecting them. I forget what it's called, but it damages the leaves. Yes, it says here the leaves are crumpled and rusty brown. Anyway, Tommy wants to talk about turbine ideas. So let's see, can we manage to find Tommy? Tommy, tell us about your ideas for turbines.
Just to say, welcome back, Phil.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. I put this idea forward, but I was castigated by Michael George down at the Welbeck because he said it'll spoil his walk along Marine Drive, which is where the ideal place would be to put water turbines.
Yeah.
And you could have wind turbines along there as well, so you'd have constant energy from both sorts. You know.
Yeah. And do you think the people of Douglas would be happy to have wind turbines?
Well, I'm in Douglas now, Bill. Listen. So we're going to upset a dozen people a day that walks out there. Listen, if you want to go for a walk, you can go around the other end and go down to Cronk-Grenier. Go down there. You don't have to use Marine Drive. We should have embraced that years ago. How many people a day go along there, Phil? Let's get those get the wind turbines up, and then get the water turbines in as well, and they'll take over when the wind is at its lowest. And they'll be constant with the tides in and the tides out. So that's my suggestion.
Well, thanks very much, Tommy, for that. We are starting to get towards the end of the programme now, so I don't know if you got anything else you wanted to tell us, or... No, he's gone. Right, so I've had a message in on WhatsApp. Old prom or new prom, look what they've destroyed. What do you think? And there's an image that I'm supposed to click, and I'm always a bit nervous of clicking on images. So I don't know, but different people will have different views about what's happened in relation to the promenade. And Graham Fox-Hume often frequenting this programme, and he writes, as I've said many times, the best way forward for energy independence for the island is geothermal energy. It's clean and green, it does not produce carbon dioxide, it is unobtrusive, scalable and available 24/7, 365, with a lifetime in 50s if not hundreds of years. As Julian points out, wind and solar power just don't work, hence the false information being put about. So I think we're almost at the end of the programme. Oh yes, the damage to the horse chestnut leaves is called a horse chestnut mining moth. I'm a student on the Conservation and Landscaping course at the college, and our tutor Andre Doubledam taught us that last week, and that's from Maria. So where are we at? We've got 25 seconds left before we move into the ad break. I've certainly had a great time. I hope you have too. I'm not sure who's back on Mannin Line next week, whether Andy's back. Yes, I think he is. And I'm sure he will manage to fix all the things that I've broken in the meantime. But let's have a little listen to the theme music. So yes, as the theme music suggests, we move towards the end of the programme. Some very interesting discussions there. Certainly the one about the lime trees. That came from off field. I wasn't expecting that one, and very interesting too. I'm sure Andy would be interested in hearing if anyone else is listening wanted to text in or call into the programme to talk about that next week. Very interesting discussion about Windfarms, and I think I managed to control myself and not be too obviously on one side or the other on that debate. Lots of things that we could have talked about, but we're running out of time. Perspective this week is all about housing, and that should be a bit of a humdinger, so well worth listening.